All right. Questions? I'm sure you got some. Let's talk about 'em. I see a hand up. I love a hand. All right. Let me go to that person. It's Meyer Patricia. I don't know if your name was reversed there, but Patricia, can you turn your microphone
I actually raised my hand on accident, but I do have a question.
on? Well, hey, listen, it's a pleasure to talk to an accident. Thank you.
Okay. What are the examples of what we can put on in for the concessions? Like you said, a recession, or can you give us some examples that we could put in there of
Sure.
the triggers for deferring the payments, et cetera?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. In other words, definition of these will always be nuanced by the type of business that it is and how your income comes in and what would reduce your income coming in. But essentially, you're looking at what are the things that would happen to you or your company in a recession or in something where it's beyond your control. In other words, if you're not running the business well and the economy's doing fine, your sales are going down. That's not what would trigger these things. Okay. What would trigger these things is the things that would be beyond your control. So there are either government elements that could come into effect in a recession, especially one where you have inflation. In other words, the inflation factor goes above a certain point. And what that means is it could be tied to the inflation index. It could be tied to the prime rate index, because as the interest rates go up, it gets harder and harder for you to make your payments, right? Because you're having to pay more and more interest. So if the interest rates go above a certain point, you get deferment. Okay. So that way the lender portion of this is still getting technically their interest rates. It's just they're not getting it now. So that deferment would be pushed back into months when the economics of that turned around. You could do it with the amount of the recession. In other words, every recession has metrics that the government publishes with respect to the recession. It's employment rate. It can be anything from the inflation rate to the interest rate to I'm trying to think of the best one here for a recession. In other words, if the total economy drops 3 to 5%, okay, over a period of time, for every 1/4% drop as a result of inflation, in other words, of negative growth, that you get X amount of forgiveness on your debt. Okay. It's not forgiveness, it's deferral. So the whole idea is to structure this so that the single source of the money, they don't lose by this, but they're well capitalized. So they just get to absorb the shock until it straightens itself out, and then you can catch up. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Very welcome. All right. Anybody else have any that they want to cover with us here today in the way of question? And you can type them in. You can talk them in. You can do, all right, we got a question here. Let's see how that works. So I just lost it. Where'd it go? There it is. All right. It says, how do you mitigate the current astronomical rate of real estate prices versus more than likely upcoming recession? First of all, you buy real estate. And one of the reasons we're doing what we are in the multifamily residential real estate area, in other words, we're buying apartment houses, we're syndicating them amongst investors. And because of the anticipated inflation and the rise in values of those properties over a 3 to 5 year period, we're going to be able to easily double and triple people's money that's invested in these, because we're borrowing 80% with federally backed loans, because the federal government wants people to be able to get housing. So we're able to borrow 80% of the purchase price now at 4% money, and that money's not going up, it's fixed. And so the leverage of 20% equity to the growth of the property that's only got 4% interest on 80% of the value of the property is huge leverage. So we'll share that with investors, and that gives us the ability to attract investors to that as a hedge against inflation, and to give them a great return on their money, and to give us ownership of some incredible properties. So that's one way to capitalize on the increase that these properties will have in cash value, not necessarily real value, because that will all be eaten up by inflation, I'm sure. But it's a way to capitalize on the increase in price value as a way of doing this. Okay, now you add to your question here is, how do you incorporate a drop of 5 to 10% loss of real estate price in the unitranche transaction? Okay, when you say 5 to 10% less of real estate price, I don't know where you get that from, because everything that we see, say the price of the real estate is going to go up. Now, this may not be true in commercial real estate. See, commercial and residential are very different. Okay, residential, everybody's got to live someplace. The government's going to help you finance it because they want to have the ability for people to have affordable housing. So they want to protect the real estate industry, because that protects renters in their ability to be able to actually rent property. However, for commercial, it's different. And there easily could be a 5%, 5 to 10% loss of their real estate value. So one of the things that you might want to do is to spin off the realty, you not include it in the purchase. And you do that by a sale leaseback. Let somebody else take the risk of the property value going down. You fix your cost in terms of a lease arrangement with them, and you convert that asset back into cash that instantly pays itself off. You're buying the business, it's got the real estate. You flip the real estate, but you can do that right in the close. You set up your sale leaseback with the leaseback company's money going right into the escrow that closes out the transaction. And now you've cashed out that asset, and now you don't have to worry about it. So now your single source finance group is now financing everything else in the company, with all those other things being true as we explain them. But the real estate has been extracted from the transaction through a sale leaseback. So if you have more question about that, I'll be glad to explain it, but that's essentially hopefully answers your question in full. All right. Any other questions here? I don't see any other ones. All right. Well, you're going to make this a short day for me. I was ready for a bunch of questions here. By the way, I really like financing. It solves problems for everybody that are typical in a traditional type of financing, because the only folks who were really protected in the other traditional form of an acquisition were the banks and the asset-based lenders. Everybody else was running naked. Now we take that out of the equation, and we have everybody protected by that extra asset over and above the loan-to-value ratio that was going to the other folks. So we don't overprotect them. Everybody's just better protected. All right. Well, listen, if you don't have any questions for me, I got deals to do, and I'm going to go get them done. Just to tell you what we're working on, we are really made a lot of progress on this jet charter company that we're looking to acquire. We're well into the negotiations now. What we're finding is that we're able to use scale for and billionaire lifestyles and that strategic aggregation to become very attractive to not only the jet company, but also a whole bunch of other companies that their clientele is the uber wealthy. The fact that these folks that are very wealthy have a way that they spend their money where they have common type where there are many resources that service them, where they're the common clientele of those businesses. And by aggregating those companies together in a strategic aggregation, i.e. billionaire lifestyles, supported by scale force, the jet charter, when they're looking at what we're doing in the way of acquiring them, leaving them with a percentage ownership in the company so that they can participate from the growth that's going to be propelled by scale force and the strategic aggregation, we're able to get them excited. And we've already pulled them away from the competitors who were trying to get the company, who could only offer them a value based on their current traditional value, as opposed to sharing with them the value that we can help them create through that strategic aggregation and through the scale force automation of that whole cross-marketing and cross-selling. So that was a really big element that we're able to add that knocks out the competition and gets the folks that we want seeing us as the best buyer for the company, and where they get to have a share of the win with us that gets them very excited. We're doing something similar with this agricultural group out of New Zealand, and we're very far along in buying out another company that's not a competitor of theirs, but they are exactly in the same business. They just do it in a different part of the world, and they're bigger than they are. They're 7 times their size, but that person is retiring, and the idea that they can only get so much for the company by selling to other seed companies or other public companies that are agricultural based, we have a better business model for them. We have a better acquisition structure for them. And so we've knocked out the competition there as well. So those two are just doing super, super well. And it's a real bonus for innovation and creativity in acquisition, that you don't just go after everybody in the normal way. You allow yourself to think out of the box. How do you bring new values to the acquired company and their owners? And how do you share that value with them in a constructive way to knock out the competition and make sure that you get the deal as opposed to somebody else? Ben, I see you have a question here, so let me see if I can get at it. To do the sale leaseback in escrow. Okay. How to do the sale leaseback in escrow. Okay. What you do is, let's say that you already own the company, right? You already owned it. If you didn't want to own the real estate anymore, you wanted to do a sale leaseback transaction, how would you do that? There are companies out there that do that. That's their business, is taking real estate that people would rather lease than own, but they already own it, and they'll buy it from you and lease it back to you. And that's their business. Okay. So there's no problem finding the companies to do that. They advertise, they want to do it. Okay. So the question now is, okay, you don't own the company yet. If you remember our double escrow technique, it's the same type of thing. They become part of that double escrow in effect. They put the money into the escrow account for the leaseback, for the purchase. You have the lease agreements already signed as if you were the owner. They're already sitting in the escrow. So when the escrow closes, they get all the paperwork, you get the money, everything's done. Okay. And that way you get the money that you need to cover the closing. So it's no different than the double escrow technique. It's not done any different than if you already own the building, except you don't. So you do the paperwork through the escrow so that when the escrow closes, you do own the building and everything's now signed and facilitated by the fact that you are now the owner of the building when the money actually changes hands. So that's basically how that's done. How do you join Scaleforce? It depends how you want to join Scaleforce. Okay. You can join as a solution partner where you're one of the businesses that provide solutions to this network of the providers who all have a common type clientele, or you can be part of it where we would help you where you would be one of our provisionaries in the process where we train people to be what are called, in this case, the certified concierge professional. But let me give you an example. I don't know if this is what you're asking, but let me give you an example. If we have a person who is a very wealthy person, they love convenience. They love having things work where they don't have to worry about them. They don't care about the money. They just want to live a life of ease, convenience, and privilege. Okay. And every day that goes by, that's happening for them. And it's seamless with no hassle and no aggravation. They're happy folks. We look at all the things that the wealthy people want to be true for them. And then we train a person who is a concierge type function. And we create a nation that when they're fully trained, they will be qualified as a certified concierge professional. That party will supply the services that those wealthy people want. But we have software that ties that person into every one of our providers, and every one of our providers is tied into that software, which makes them working together seamless. So what Scaleforce does is it enables all of those solution providers to function into one system where they're seamless in how they work together. So if I get an order from another provider's client to do something for them that's facilitated through that concierge professional, everything is handled in the system and I can track it and see it and integrate it with every other service provider that I need to work with. Okay. So let's say I'm the concierge professional and I get either a text or a call from one of the clients of one of our solution providers. And they're saying to me something as simple as, I need to get to Boston and back in the quickest way possible. And I need you to just set the whole thing up for me. We're going to have a set of preferences already in our system with that wealthy person. But we'll handle everything from the limo that picks them up, which will be one of our providers, to the private jet that'll be there at the runway, ready to take him to wherever he wants to go, to the limousine service picking him up, to the hotel or private residence that he'll be staying at. So it's like pillow to pillow. Everything is handled for them. And that system, Scaleforce, enables it to be integrated with every single one of our providers, and all of the handoffs from one provider to the next provider to the next provider are all built into the system. So once everybody's plugged in, it's as if they were operating as if they were one company with everything automated and facilitated through that system. So it's convenient for the wealthy person. It's fantastic for each of those service providers. Whoever was the source of the client, they're going to get a revenue share from every one of those services that we provided. Build out that client for those services. A little portion of it's going to go off to whoever was the original source of that client. And so everybody's got more clients than they would have had. And the people who are bringing their clients into the system are getting extra revenue from all these other service providers that they never saw a dime from before and never could work with them before. And everybody won, from the wealthy person who had seamless travel, ease, no hassle, handled with one phone call or one text. All of those things are facilitated through that system. And it's got different benefits in different industries as we strategically aggregate them. But that's how it works in the travel industry in particular, but in anything that wealthy people spend their money on, that's part of that system. It's a mouthful. It's very hard to explain simply to people because it's not simple. And when we started this system, everybody said it was too complex. You can't do it. An automobile's got 30,000 parts in it. You get in and drive it, and you don't worry about the 30,000 parts. You just steer it, you brake it, and you step on the gas pedal and you go. Okay. And you don't care about all that complexity. So we just reduce the complexity complexity down to automation through technology. And we let the technology do the work, and we set it up so that the folks just have to get in and turn the steering wheel and drive. And that's what the system is set up to do. So we believe that's the future of business. We believe that's the future for wealthy people who don't want to have these hassles and just want ease and convenience and to have those things handled for them. And then we do other things for them too. Like with that database of people, we know who's in what industry, who's in what business, who is what ways in which they develop their wealth. And so we'll be sponsoring for them getaways or meetings where we bring together a mind meld of the key movers and shakers in certain areas where they can actually now, by our proactive invitation, take part in things that will benefit them and help them to create more wealth and share ideas and innovations with people who can benefit them. Most people don't realize this, and it's a little bit of an aside here. Everybody knows there's this place in Florida called Palm Beach. And if you've ever driven along the main road along the coast, or if you've been in a boat and you've gone up the coast, you see all of these mansions, incredible mansions, one to the other, if the other goes on for miles. And substantially all of those mansions were actually built at the turn of the century, not the last century. The turn of the 1800s to the 1900th century to the years. It's where all of the folks who were involved in the Industrial Revolution, the Fords, the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, all of those folks from that generation, where they all built their vacation homes, their winter vacation homes. And the reason that they built them there is they would all arrange to be there at the same time. And they took that opportunity to share with each other what they were doing, how they were doing it, what their opportunities were, what challenges they had, how they were going to look to overcome their challenges, how each could contribute to the other and help the other sustain and receive remuneration or reward from the things that they could do in exchange and interchange with each other. And it's part of how they developed their wealth, because they had this mastermind of all of these incredible, inventive and knowledgeable and resourceful people who got together for that purpose. That doesn't happen much anymore, and it certainly doesn't happen in an organized way. So one of the things we have the opportunity to do with Billionaire Lifestyles is to proactively set those opportunities up for the very wealthy people that are amongst the client base of all of our solution providers in that system. The answer to your question, Ben, is how do you join Scaleforce is you just call me, okay? And you have my number, 805-497-1000. You just give me a call. If I'm busy, somebody will take your incoming call and I will get back to you. I'll talk to you about whatever it is that you need to know to understand how you can integrate with Scaleforce, what it can do for you, how we can make it available to you. And I'm happy to have that conversation. All right. Let me see. What's the next one here? All right, I think I got everybody's question. All right. So I got 5 minutes left. I didn't do too bad. I filled up the hour, hopefully with beneficial information. And I want to thank everybody for being here and being part of this today. And I look forward to seeing you during the next one of these that we have, which will be the 4th Wednesday of this month. And then the next pro one will be the 2nd Wednesday of next month. So until then, I wish you all a success.